All right, there we go. Cool. Well, I would like to just start it off by doing some introductions, and then we'll get over to our slides here in just a second. But we're just so glad you could join us here for this course and here this morning. And we're so excited to jump into some really fun, engaging, creative computing with you with Scratch, and kind of digging deeper into the intermediate and advanced concepts. We think it's going to be so fun, and we just can't wait to engage with it with you all. So my name is Andrea Wilson Vasquez. I am the Director of Educator Training at Code Savvy, which is a Minnesota nonprofit, and we'll tell you a little bit more about Code Savvy in a little bit. But I'm also an innovative instructional coach in Intermediate District 287. So I'm still at my school part-time, and then work with Code Savvy as well. And I'm just super passionate about all things kind of creative related to computing. And one check-in question that I want to throw out there is, what is one creative thing that you have, that you kind of like to do as an outlet? So maybe if we can do introductions and say like your name and maybe where you teach and what your role is, and then a creative outlet that you like to engage in. And I'll give you a moment to think about that here. I did share my creative outlet. One creative thing that I like to do, and I haven't done it in a little bit, but I did start doing it again with COVID, is sewing. I found a love of sewing a couple of years ago, and then got into sewing masks and things now during COVID. So that's been kind of a fun way to reconnect, fun and strange way to reconnect, I guess, with sewing. Cool. Well, we can just kind of do popcorn introductions here so that people can share when they're ready, but I'd love to hear from you who you are, where you're from, and maybe a creative outlet that you enjoy.
I could share. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, go ahead.
Perfect. Hi, everybody. My name's Tom Casalino. I'm helping to co-facilitate this course with Andrea. I teach in St. Paul Public Schools, and I work with Code Savvy through the Educator Training Program. A couple creative things that I like to do. One being productive is just kind of projects around the house. We're currently getting our house ready to sell, so there's been a big slew of projects that we've had to do, and I just find that really just relaxing and I guess kind of fun to be able to like kind of work on something, complete it, and see like a big change. And then if I want to do something just for fun, I really enjoy playing video games. So kind of a mix between those two really kind of gotten me through COVID.
Awesome. Thanks, Tom. Glad you're here. Excited to co-facilitate with you. All right. Anybody else? Feel free to jump in.
I can go. My name's Whitney. I teach computer science at Bloomington Public Schools, K-5. There's lots of Bloomington people here. Well, 4 of us. And I don't remember what else. Oh, my creative outlet. I also like to sew, and I like to make bows for my daughters, but they refuse to wear them now. They used to wear them every day, but now they refuse. But I also have a Cricut, so I like to make things with that. So I'm a crafter.
Oh, that's awesome.
To share something else?
No, that's great. That's perfect. Yeah, thanks. Glad you're here, Whitney.
My name is Ashley. I'm also a Bloomington Public Schools person. I'll be doing tech integration and computer science this year. Very excited. And I actually, at the beginning of quarantine, I started knitting. And I didn't get very far because then school kicked in, but yeah, it was kind of fun. Taught myself, watched some YouTube clips and learned how to knit. So
that's awesome. Yeah. You'll have to let us know if you pick it back up and if you make some. We'd love to see it.
Make a scarf.
Yeah. A scarf. Yeah, perfect. The only goal would be just to finish it before it gets cold out.
Exactly. I have time.
Yeah, that's fine. Thanks, Ashley. Glad you're here.
I'll keep the Bloomington theme going here. I'm Lee Nelson, and with Bloomington Public Schools, similar to Ashley, computer science and tech integration. Ashley's at the middle school level, I'm at the elementary level. And let's see, some creative things, I guess, a little bit like some answers before. I've been getting some stuff done around the house, which has been really great because typically in summer I have a lot of other things going on. But probably like most of you, I had a lot of things wiped off my summer calendar that are normally there. So just been getting a chance to get in and get some things checked off, some lists that have been on that list for far too long. So
totally, completely understand that. Thanks, Lee. We're so glad you're here.
Hello, I'm Gretchen Orth, also from Bloomington. I will be doing tech integration and computer science at another Bloomington school, similar to Lee and Ashley. One creative thing that I enjoy doing is dancing. So I've been a dancer since I was 3 years old, and I still teach dance. So that's just kind of something that keeps me active and keeps those creative juices flowing.
That's awesome. Glad to meet you, Gretchen. Glad you're here.
Yeah, I'll go. So my name's Amy. I work in the Hope School in Minneapolis with Create Minneapolis, teaching Lego robotics and coding. And something creative I like to do is write. So yeah, I've always enjoyed like making stories or writing poetry or just blogging about my day. So yeah.
That's awesome. Welcome, Amy. We're glad you're here.
Thanks.
Hi, I'm Jean Weiss. I'm Executive Director of Code Savvy. And what I like to do creatively is cook. I don't like to necessarily bake, but I like to cook different meals. We get magazines or I go online and find things to try. And we've been trying a few new things.
Awesome. Thanks, Jean. Glad you're here.
I think I'm the only one who's left. Hi, I'm Eileen King. I work at the Bakken Museum where I get to employ a wide range of creative outlets. I'm not going to be around much this week because I mostly have to be at summer camp counselor training where we are making cardboard circuits and doing woodworking stuff and engineering challenges and a whole lot of really goofy things. But lately I have also tapped back into like coding as a creative thing to do, which sounds like a dumb thing to say here, but it's been a long time since like I wrote code that challenged me rather than like writing lesson plans for children to code, I guess. Does that track with anybody else?
Yeah. Do you want to share about the project you've been working on at all?
No.
Okay.
Not right this second.
No worries. We're really glad you're here. Thanks, Eileen.
It's good to be here. Thanks.
Awesome. Just checking. Did we get anybody else not get a chance to introduce themselves yet? All right. Good deal. Well, I'm going to share my screen and we'll jump over to our slides here so that we can kind of walk you through a few things. And then really the whole purpose of our live sessions is to do things that would be harder to do asynchronously. So we want to make sure that you have lots of chances to share. We want to make sure that we have time to do some discussions kind of in collaborative format. And then we also are going to collaborate. We're going to try out some virtual pair programming today and just do things that hopefully you could try using with students if we need to be distance learning again in the fall. And all throughout everything that we do, we sincerely value your expertise and your perspectives and really welcome your kind of your 2 cents. We want to know what you think. We want to know what connections you're making or what other ideas you have. So please feel free to jump in with those at any time. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Okay, I'll make sure I'm on the right. Yep, here we go. All right, so we are here day 1 of Scratch Camp. We are so excited again to welcome you for this first iteration of a virtual Scratch Camp for us. And we're just excited to learn and to engage with you as we go through our week together. And just a reminder that you can participate in this Scratch Camp synchronously through kind of keeping track with us day by day through these 4 days this week, or you have up to 2 weeks after this Thursday, so I think it ends up being July 10th maybe. You have up to 2 weeks after our last day together here to turn in materials for feedback. At the end of our course, you have the opportunity to earn like a course completion certificate and your CEUs. We estimate that this course will take about 20 hours, so you'll earn 20 hours for technology CEUs. And if you'd like to get feedback and get that course certificate, we ask that you try to finish up in kind of the next couple of weeks. And we're happy to answer any questions about that as they come up. We did introductions already. If you want to reach out to Tom or I, email or social media are good ways. Our emails are each of our first names at codesavvy.org. and then our Twitter handles are listed there. I'll turn it over to Tom here.
Yeah, so just a little bit about Code Savvy as an organization. It's based out of the Twin Cities, and we're really focused on just empowering all youth and educators with skills and knowledge they need to support technology and computer science education. There are a number of programs that Code Savvy offers. We are part of the MNCodes Educator Training Program, so we do things like the cohort that's a year-long opportunity to meet once a month to dive into computer science. Ashley and Whitney were both in the cohort. Hopefully they enjoyed it, but it's our cohort's kind of our main thing to really dive in, but there's also a number of other opportunities as well. We have different opportunities for trainings and partnerships with schools, and we're starting online courses like this as well. So that's kind of all under the educator programming. There's a number of things for students as well. There are coder dojos. Eileen runs a coder dojo in Northfield. There's coder dojos in Twin Cities and down in South Minnesota. There are other programs like Technovation, which is a great program for middle school girls to develop and design an app using a tool like Thunkable to create the app. And then they create like a business plan and pitch it at Appapalooza, which is a huge event in the spring. So that's a great one too. But all these are kind of housed under Code Savvy. So Code Savvy is like the big kind of umbrella organization, and there's lots of branches underneath that. But really Code Savvy is all about helping to empower the next generation of computer scientists to really dive in.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I would just add that we, as kind of the lens that we use to look at all of our programs and to interact with the community is really, we're all about interrupting and counteracting the gender, racial, and socioeconomic biases that have existed and continue to exist in computing. And we'll talk a little bit about how that filters into our work with educators and with kids. But we really view equity and kind of the active stance of interrupting and counteracting those biases as really central to our work together. We did want to give you a chance if you're interested at all. We did our introductions already, but we wanted to invite you, if you'd like to share any favorite Scratch resource or project. This was something that a few people posted about in our discussion board, and we can do a little bit today and kind of sprinkle this throughout our week together, or we could do this asynchronously as well, but we wanted to give people a chance to do a little bit of sharing. And I can go first. I was just going to share something as simple as one of my favorite things about Scratch is just the Scratch community. I am always amazed to see what kids are coming up with and sort of what is top of mind for them in this present moment. I mean, when I look at the Scratch community right now, seeing things like how to make your own cough mask, things like celebrating Juneteenth, Black Lives Matter, platformer games, looking at A Dog's Way Home, like storytelling in a game. There was another one down below here that I thought was really interesting, like coughing in a grocery store. Like these are things that are top of mind for kids right now. And I just am always really thrilled to see what kids are creating and kind of what's out there. So that's one of my favorite things about Scratch. Sharing can look like that. If you have a favorite project, I'm happy to anybody can share their screen. I'm happy to let you share your screen here, or if you want to talk us through something, that's welcome as well. So I'll just kind of open up the floor.
I don't necessarily have a favorite project, but one of my favorite things I learned about with Scratch this year is the ability to remix projects. And I found like that was really helpful with kids because I was teaching grades 3 through 5. So we could give like a starter project if they wanted it, and then they could remix it, so add on to it. But it just gave them like a base where all kids could start if they needed it. And I really liked that feature. I felt like it really made it more accessible to all students.
Yeah, that's awesome. I appreciate you sharing that.
I could share one of my favorite projects. I was a makerspace facilitator for a couple of years, and I worked with groups of like 4th and 5th grade a lot with Scratch during that time. And we created a music making project. And I really enjoyed it because it just kind of naturally evolved as we went. We had done a couple like introductory Scratch stuff before with doing a couple tutorials and then just like a basics like about me project. And this was kind of one of our bigger next projects to look at Scratch in a different way to make music. And a lot of kids that didn't really like Scratch before just loved the music making capabilities of it. So we started really basic by like adding sprites to the screen, and then like when you would click on it, different sounds would happen. Kids love to be able to like modify and record their own sounds and assign them different sprites. And then we just kind of kept gradually adding like skill after skill. We started to think, okay, well, what if we could animate the sprites as they were going? So it started with like instruments kind of animating, and then it kind of evolved into one we created as a whole class where it's like a person in the middle and there's different instruments around him. And as he click on different instruments, he kind of reaches out and does different things. So I'll post a link to that in our Canvas discussion. But it was a really fun project just because it was cool to see students kind of diving in that weren't really interested in Scratch before that. And then also how it just kind of evolved and slowly we added idea after idea as kids would have little ideas. Oh, what if we tried this? Or what if we tried this? And then it kind of turned into this really kind of cool end project. So that was a really fun project to work on with students.
That's awesome. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, we'd love to see a link to that if you want to share that in Canvas later. That sounds awesome. Anybody else like to share? Go.
Sure. I did some work with the Google CS First curriculum, and a lot of that just focused on just getting to know what are some of those basic blocks that can be used for tools within Scratch. And so we did a lot of dialogue, which I know isn't the most advanced things that you can do within Scratch, but that obviously would lead to lots of other things that kids wanted to do with their sprites. So I found myself creating quite a few little opening dialogue scenes for kids to kind of be inspired from as kind of like the beginning of my lesson to showcase some of the things that they might want to use or employ themselves. So I'll throw a link in the chat here as far as one of the ones that I had done with a group of 5th graders in case anyone wants to look at that later on, I guess. And I kind of reused that for quite a few different lessons. I would kind of like, when he was talking about remixing, I would kind of make some different copies or let kids remix different things to kind of take it and then tweak it and make it their own.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that link there. Do you want me to share my screen and you can talk us through it real quick?
Sure.
Happy to do that. Absolutely. Let's see. All right, here goes.
So again, it's just an example of 2 sprites in a conversation. And so as we were working with some things, kids could see, what I had done. So I always tended to use good old Scratch Cat and then that little blue dog. Trying to remember which one this one was particular as far as what lesson we're doing, but they always have a little conversation to begin things off with. And then just get the kids excited about maybe what the focus for the lesson was that day, which was, again, just creating some different conversations in Scratch. I don't know if you want to go to like the C inside too to look at an example of some of the code. So a lot of it was just, different say and wait blocks to kind of get the sense of timing if you're creating kind of like this animation. So we, typically employ a couple different sprites or more if you felt like you could handle that. And then work a lot on the different timing of having one sprite go through a series of dialogue and then kind of have the other one bounce back with, and there's a little bit of math embedded in all that, of course, as far as when one sprite is doing their thing and then when the other sprite's going to do their thing.
That's awesome. Very cool. Cool. Thanks for sharing that. Anybody else interested in sharing?
Can I share a project real quick?
Yeah, of course.
Maybe some of y'all ran into this. So normally there's a Scratch Day in May where they try to promote large-scale gatherings of people doing Scratchy things together. That was obviously not a great option this year. So May was kind of Scratch month, and then there were different sort of weekly challenges and themes. And my favorite of those ideas Let me hit screen share. Yeah. My favorite of those things was the Hack Your Window challenge. And so it's a really simple trick where you have one picture of a window as a backdrop and then a sprite that's a copy but with the like window panes cut out so that you can put all kinds of whatever you want in there and it looks like it's happening outside your actual window. So I just made this unicorn run by and do rainbow things. But if you search Scratch for Hack Your Window, there's studios of people doing some amazing stuff. And I just like the idea is so simple and so clever and so like connects to your real world. And you know, you can use your imagination to like, well, I'm stuck inside, but here's what I wish was going on outside my window. I like it a lot. How do I stop screen
That's
sharing?
awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. Hack Your Window. Love it. Anybody else? And again, we'll kind of sprinkle sharing every live session we have, as well as asynchronously. There's a chance to share in our Canvas course through a discussion board. So no pressure if you're not quite ready to share now. That's totally okay. All right, and I think we had one other participant join us. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi everybody. Sorry, I'm battling with my computer that's about ready to go in to be replaced this morning, but I'm Chris Turnbull. I'm from St. Paul, and I work at the district level as part of our personalized learning team. And I am really kind of a novice at Scratch, actually, since it hasn't been iPad friendly for a few years now until last fall. I've kind of used a lot of different apps on the iPad and a little bit less of Scratch. So this probably last January and February, I started using Scratch 3 again after not having used it probably for about 5 years. But I saw a project in one of our teachers' classrooms where a student had created a program where the sprite was kicking along a soccer ball on a diagonal line, and it was really cool to be there in the class while that was happening because the teacher was a little stumped at how the student did it, so he actually stopped all the instruction and had the students teach everyone in the class how he was able to program that soccer ball sprite to move diagonally across the screen in the game. So that was pretty cool to see a student doing the instruction in the class.
Love that. That's so awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. Glad you're here, Chris.
Thanks.
All right. Well, again, we'll invite sharing kind of throughout our time together here. And if there is a moment here as we're sharing this morning, as we're connecting this morning, that you're like, oh, I have a perfect project to illustrate that, great, we welcome that. So please feel free to jump in at any time. I'll go back to sharing my screen now. We'd love to tell you a little bit more about kind of how this week will work or how our course is structured. So I'm going to hop over to this slide here. And Tom, do you want to just talk us through kind of our course overview for this week?
Yeah, sure. So we've done Scratch Camps a number of times in the past for many years over the summer, but this is one of the first times we're doing it fully online. So it was kind of a challenge at first, but as we started to talk about it more, we felt that it really fit nicely. So we tried to structure it where a lot of our live sessions in the morning would focus really on discussion and sharing, kind of diving into some ideas behind Scratch, kind of like the pedagogy of implementing Scratch, some best practices, things to keep in mind, sharing ideas. Those things would be really incorporated into the live discussions each morning. And again, if you're not able to make the live sessions each morning, we'll be recording it and posting a recap afterwards. And then in the afternoons, it'll be more asynchronous time, kind of digging into the individual skills of Scratch. There are tons and tons and tons of resources out there, both community created by Scratch themselves, created by groups like Scratch Wiki. There's lots of resources to help be able to learn the skills of Scratch. So what we've done is we've compiled many resources in a design journal that we've shared through Canvas. So there are a lot of links, there's examples, there's lots of different things to be able to kind of choose your own skills that you really want to focus on with Scratch. Since Scratch is such a big thing, we're all at different levels and our students are all at different levels. So we wanted to incorporate a lot of choice into this course where you can kind of choose your own skills you really want to focus on and create a project around those. So this first day on Monday is really all about kind of getting started, getting used to Canvas, making sure we're all kind of on the same page with Scratch, looking at some skills in Scratch and how we can intentionally move those from beginning to advanced. So during asynchronous time today, you'll be starting a small project that identifies a skill you want to focus on and kind of shows examples of how you can get kids started with beginning levels of that skill and then progress it up intentionally. Tuesday and Wednesday are focusing on a lot of things like CSTA standards, incorporating Scratch into curriculum areas, looking at how we can kind of connect that to other content areas, and again, keeping the theme of best practices, how we can make sure we're doing this equitably. So that's kind of Tuesday, Wednesday, and during that time, during the asynchronous time, we'll be creating a bigger project on your own during the asynchronous time that shows how to incorporate Scratch into content areas to help kind of support standards. So we have a couple tools and structures we have that kind of support that. So we'll be exploring that on your own during the asynchronous time. And as a way to support the asynchronous time, each day we have office hours. So we tried to pick various office hours at different times just to try to accommodate everyone's schedules. So on Monday and Tuesday, it's more in the afternoons. On Wednesday, it's in the morning. But those are times where anything you need support around, you can just come check in. If those office hours don't work for you, there are other ways to connect. Like there's discussions in Canvas, you can email or chat. So there's different ways to get support. But those office hours are intended to just answer any questions. If there's something that you really want to dive into that we're not hitting in the live sessions, we can talk about it there. If there's questions you have while working on your project, you can do it there. So we tried to structure it to take advantage of the synchronous learning times and really call out the things that work better when we're together, right? Like sharing ideas, asking questions, things like that. And then the asynchronous time is kind of focused on you identifying the skills that you really want to and digging into those. And again, we have a lot of resources in our design journal where that'll help you kind of do that. So that's kind of the overview of our course throughout the week.
Yeah, Thursday we don't have an optional office hours because our Thursday live session, we made it a little longer again, and then we're going to have like a mini Scratch meetup, sort of like a small unconference where in the beginning time we'll have a chance to share and do some connecting about sustainability and next steps, and then we'll invite you to kind of share about a topic that you'd like to dig into further, and then we'll form kind of some breakout groups around those different topics. So that's what's coming up on Thursday. Sort of our overarching goals for this course are really to help one another develop skills and equitable teaching practices for computer science, continue to build our knowledge and understanding of those intermediate and advanced Scratch features, and we're really focused on hands-on activities. We're gonna dive into things and engage in things so that we can figure out how we would teach them with students by being learners ourselves. Like we mentioned, we're going to really work on collaborating and sharing with other participants, whether that happens during these live sessions or asynchronously. That's both of those are really valid. And then looking at those different pedagogical skills and mindsets that help us to incorporate computer science into the classroom. One thing that we wanted to mention and that I think is helpful to ground us in our work together is just some definitions around computer science and computational thinking. Computer science can be a really tricky thing to define, especially in schools where different teachers of different subject areas are coming in to teach computer science, and like at the high school where some classes are maybe classified as a computer science class, but are maybe more of a computer applications class where they're working on learning how to use different, computer programs like Microsoft Word, et cetera. So we just wanted to have kind of a common definition moving forward. And this comes from the K-12 CS framework, which is a really great resource for some different kind of guiding practices and principles, as well as they have a really good glossary. So their definition of computer science, and the one that we ascribe to as well, is that computer science is the study of computers and algorithmic processes, including their principles, hardware and software designs, their implementation, and then their impact on society. And when we think about ways that computer science can be so powerful and an amazing medium for communication and change, I think the kind of collaboration of all of the pieces of computer science coming together to impact society is really how that happens. Computational thinking is one of our kind of guiding practices through our work, and that is thinking about kind of the mindset of kind of how we approach computer science. So the human ability to formulate problems so that the solutions to those problems can be represented as computational steps or algorithms that could be executed by a computer. So one way we like to refer to that is kind of systematic solutions. So how could we formulate the solution to a problem in a systematic way so that a computer might be able to execute that solution, and also so that we could communicate it with other people so that it's easily understandable. So we've mentioned a couple of times kind of our focus on equity and the active stance we take on interrupting and counteracting gender, racial, and socioeconomic biases. And one way that we do that is through the NCWIT engagement practices framework. I'm not sure if any of you are familiar with it. Those who have been in the cohort in the past, I think, have interacted with it some. But we wanted to just kind of take a moment to highlight a few of the different practices that NCWIT highlights. And let me pause and tell you that NCWIT stands for the National Center for Women in Technology. And they have an amazing kind of site filled with resources and things in a variety of languages and research-based practices. So if you're looking for stats or presentations or ways to kind of talk with others about how to engage a variety of different learners in computer science, that's a really good resource site. So today we wanted to just kind of take a look at these three different practices and what sort of qualifies under each one of them. And we'd love to hear from you about ways that you see these connecting with your work presently, or kind of an entry point for how you might approach this. So I'm going to click into this first one, Make It Matter. And what I would love is in the chat, if you hear something or if you see something that connects with you and what you currently do, or something that aligns with your kind of your philosophy for teaching, feel free to drop it in the chat, and then maybe Tom could help speak it out, or we could kind of give you a chance to speak it out as well. So this first one, Make It Matter. When I click on it, there we go, it should click through, here we go. All right, so Make It Matter. When we talk about making it matter, we're really talking about ways that we can engage students to make sure that the content is relevant to them. So the very first kind of thing underneath Make It Matter is how do we make students kind of their perspective shown in the content? How do we look for a variety of different topics? How do we look for a variety of different ways that students can represent their understanding of a topic in our teaching and then in their learning? So kind of how do we make it relevant for students? Making it matter is also about connecting computer science to all the other disciplines, all the other content areas. Of course, I should have mentioned, these are not things that are outside the realm of what you're probably already doing. These are really in line with best practices for teaching and learning generally. So then incorporating student choice. In what ways are you incorporating student choice into computer science? Of course, when students have voice and choice, we know that that is an equitable teaching practice, and it's also a way to boost their engagement and to create ownership and buy-in. And then speaking about kind of the actively interrupting and counteracting biases, as things come up in class, as students voice misconceptions or talk about things that they've heard or that they've thought previously about computer science, to actually address those misconceptions. And even if students aren't bringing them up, that teachers would bring them up and say, hey, you know, there's a misconception out there that computer science is only for white males, but we'd like to actually talk about why we need a variety of perspectives. And so kind of taking an active stance at addressing those misconceptions. Any connections that anyone would like to share, or Tom, anything in the chat related to how making it matter connects with what you're already doing, or maybe connects with some of your philosophies on teaching and learning?
Yeah, just to get started, I shared an example of how, kind of going back to that music maker example I shared earlier, where some students were really connected with it once it was about making music. You know, Scratch is so open-ended, trying to use it in many different ways for many different purposes, just to allow students to kind of enter into it through their own interests. Like some students have really enjoyed it when it's about telling a story. Some students have enjoyed it more when it's like making music or something. So it's just kind of cool to see those differences as you try to purposely use Scratch in a lot of different ways. Does anyone else have any thoughts or ideas around how we can kind of make Scratch matter to lots of different students that you work with throughout the year?
I like the part about the connections, the interdisciplinary connections, because I just think, I think a lot of times when people hear computer science, all they think is coding. And I like that. I'm interested to read more about that part, just like connecting it to other fields like medicine and humanities media. I think that's going to be, I think it's going to bring more kids in and get more kids interested and more teachers even. Like it's, computer science is starting at my school next year for the first time. And I think I'm going to have to get a lot of people on board with what I'm trying to do and how this is going to be really good for our school. And I think that's going to be a really good part of it.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for sharing that. And since Scratch is so open-ended, it can really be applied to anything. So we'll really kind of look at intentional ways you can do that for sure in the next couple of days. But yeah, it's a great thing to keep in mind as you're exploring Scratch and digging in.
I was thinking about, sorry, this is Chris. I was thinking about the area of misconceptions about the field of computer science, and we've been kind of analyzing how we can roll out a K-12 computer science framework in my district. And in particular, looking at some of the research that if students haven't had computer science or coding experiences by middle school, that they really feel like they can't take the more advanced courses that we do offer in high school because they feel like they can't do it. So really kind of incorporating those computer science experiences all the way from K through 12 is super important.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. I know there's some research out there too about, I think it's around scientists in general, female scientists in general, thinking about how they first got connected to their field or how they decided to pursue a career in STEM. And by and large, these female scientists reported back that they were inspired through an early learning experience in elementary school. So when people are talking about, oh, let's get kids engaged, why don't we offer a high school class as our first kind of go at computer science? That's a really good step, but also what can we do, just as you said, Chris, what can we do to engage students earlier on? That's, we can't underestimate the power of elementary school and the ways that experiences there really do instill some inspiration and passion in students. Cool, thanks for sharing those connections. Let's take a look at this next one. So this next one is about building student confidence and professional identity. And this is really an important one, even in elementary school, where we're thinking like, oh, professional identity. But when we ask students to visualize, like we talk about visualizing student success, we encourage students to kind of visualize themselves. If our students can't see themselves as professionals or as kind of a person in a tech field or in a STEM career, then they're not necessarily going to see themselves continuing on with computer science. And part of our work is not to necessarily prepare every kid to become a computer scientist, but to know how to interact with and engage with the mindsets of computational thinking and how to work with people who do computer science related things, because by and large, more and more careers are connected to computer science in really important ways. So wanting to make sure that our students feel confident and feel an identity related to computer science. They see themselves in the field. So here are a few ways that NCWIT talks about doing that. So they talk about giving effective encouragement, and actually I would say encouragement and feedback. Research has shown that feedback is one of the most effective ways to help students kind of persevere. And so finding the right moments to encourage and the right moments to give constructive feedback, I think they're really important things. Student-centered assessment, having students do some of that self-assessing can be really important so that they are reflecting on and keeping track of how they're doing and how they're feeling about how they're doing. Of course, providing opportunities for interaction with faculty, with people who are engaged in computer science, both inside and outside of the classroom. I'd love to hear if you've had success with bringing in guest speakers. That can be such an important part about students kind of really seeing where computer science could take them beyond just creating some really cool and fun projects. And then mitigating stereotype threat. So stereotype threat is all about when we internalize kind of some of the things that people say about a group that we might belong to. So I have one quick example about this. I have a friend who took one computer science class in college. She happened to be in a sorority, and she wore her sorority sweatshirt to computer science class one day. It was like an 8 a.m. class. She was in college. She, just threw on a hoodie and went to class. Well, she was one of the few females in her class, and she was already feeling a little self-conscious about that. But when she walked in, the professor shouted out in front of this huge lecture at the U of M, shouted out, "Oh, a sorority sweatshirt. We don't really see a lot of those around these parts and, in computer science classes." And she was immediately like, "Oh my gosh, I feel really singled out. And I feel like now any negative stereotypes about females in computer science, like I'm taking those on." She dropped it. She dropped the class. She didn't pursue computer science. And to me, just really speaks to the way that those stereotypes are out there. And of course, we're aware of them, and people who stereotypes are about are aware of them. So we just need to be really careful about kind of how we approach different topics and how we might isolate different groups. So this was the building student confidence and professional identity kind of strand of the engagement practices. Any connections or examples that you'd like to share here?
Lee shared an example of how he was able to allow students to ask his brother about computer science questions. Lee, do you want to explain kind of how that was set up and how that went with students? If you don't mind me putting you on the spot there.
Yeah, that's just fine. It was just an opportunity for elementary students to ask their elementary level questions, because obviously as adults we think of more adult level questions. So it was really fun to see what kind of things the kids were wondering about in terms of what it takes to become a computer programmer, what does he do all day. And my brother, thankfully, is really good at relating things to kids on their level. So it was just a really fun opportunity for the kids to have a little bit of an engagement with someone who's actually in the field and does it for a living, and just talk more about who he is as a person and kind of what he does for a job. So I think the students and my brother really got a lot out of that. It was a lot of fun.
That's awesome. I love that.
We did something similar to what Lee's talking about in distance learning. We brought in computer scientists in the field to meet our 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students via Google Meet. And the kids were just so engaged during it and talking to a real computer scientist. And the best part was just watching their faces when they would ask questions, because we did a lot of Q&A, and they would ask questions, and the answers they got, just watching like their faces light up at the answers and just seeing like, wait, I could do that. And it just seemed like this was really meaningful. And it was probably my favorite part of, well, for sure distance learning, but even maybe my favorite part of teaching this year. It was great.
That's awesome. And I know one of the speakers, and she just continues to talk about what a cool experience that was. So it was mutually beneficial, I think. All right, I'm going to move us on to this last one about growing an inclusive community. Thanks for your participation and sharing. So this last engagement practice is really all about ways that we can make sure that our classroom community feels as inclusive and supportive and representative as possible. So a few of these we've already touched on a little bit, but of course, avoiding stereotypes where possible and addressing them when they come up. That's kind of that my add-on to how we can take that from a passive avoiding to an active interrupting and counteracting those stereotypes when they do come up. Using well-structured collaborative learning, this is one that I think, again, goes along with best practices, but when students know their specific role in collaborating, of course, they feel like they can be more present and maybe more productive. Pair programming is an excellent example of this, where if students know I'm the driver or I'm the navigator and they know exactly what's expected of them, then they can both be contributors in that learning. And then encouraging student interaction. So any way possible, encouraging student sharing, encouraging students to be connecting with one another, to kind of be engaging and collaborating. That has been shown to be really powerful. There was an additional card here, and I'm interested that they took it out, but the additional one said to consider pairing students together who have similar backgrounds in computer science or similar levels of experience with computer science. And it was sometimes a controversial topic, and so I'm wondering if that's why they took it out. But what research has found is if you partner a low student or a student who's newer to computer science with a student who's more advanced in computer science, sometimes the student who's less experienced will disengage because they're not at the same level as the more advanced student, and it can serve to kind of disengage that student or have them feel like, well, I'm never going to catch up to this other kid, so I might as well just sit back and let them kind of do their thing. So that is one thing to keep in mind when structuring collaborative learning, is who we partner kids up with can matter. And I know that's something that in classes that I've worked with before, we've really tried to structure it so that kids with similar levels of computer science experience have been partnered together. And even if that means that some pairs are moving much more slowly and others are moving much more quickly, that's okay, because they're moving at the pace that they needed and we could support them then. But they took that card out, so I'm interested about that. Any connections or any sort of anecdotes that you'd like to share about any of these engagement practices around building an inclusive community?
Some other stuff I've read from NC Wit talks a lot about like there's a lot of active community building that goes into instructional design, but also just the like ambient sense of belonging is the phrase that they use in thinking about how your classroom is designed and decorated, and how I wish I had the statistics on hand, but they cited some wild stuff about how like the presence of a single Star Wars poster or Mountain Dew can has a measurable impact on who feels welcome in the space. And yeah, so I don't know, I'm not a classroom teacher anymore, but when I went way out of my way to make things as warm and colorful as possible, because technology, like a computer lab, can be a really cold, alienating space. And consistently kids commented on it, and it felt like I was doing something right. I don't know.
Yeah, excellent point. I really appreciate you bringing that up. And in fact, I'm surprised that they don't have anything about the kind of environment, the classroom environment specifically called out here. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Like you said, I'm sure it's in their other research.
I think this really hits on like my biggest question for next year that maybe other people are wondering too, like how are we going to continue to build this collaborative learning environment and pair programming? Like we did every single lesson, kids working together. What is that going to look like, and how can we make it work next year with all the COVID restrictions or being online? So I'm really wondering if anyone has ideas for that.
Yeah, we're going to try out something today that is sort of a draft, and we are interested to see what you think and how we can build on it and hone that model to maybe be the best possibility, or one of the best possibilities.
Good.
But yeah, welcome anybody's ideas on that topic, because that's going to be a big one. I mean, maybe Scratch just needs to be needs to allow more than one kid to work on the same project at the same time. Wouldn't that be nice? All right, good deal. I appreciate your contributions and your sharing about these engagement practices. Again, these are things that we'll come back to again and again. This is one of our guiding principles. This is something that really helps to act as a lens through which we see how we approach computer science and teaching more generally. So invite you to kind of refer back to this as you want to. And again, we'll make sure that the links and everything are accessible to you. I'm going to pass it over to Tom now to tell you about one of our other guiding practices with computational thinking.
Yeah, so another piece of our foundation, I guess, if you will, that we want to build onto these ideas of the computational thinking skills. So these are kind of a set of skills and mindsets that students develop and practice and utilize as they're doing computer science. It's not just Scratch, really anything, code.org, robotics. Anytime we're working in computational activities, these skills really kind of come to the forefront. When I started computer science education, it was through Lego League about, 7 or 8 years ago. And I just got into Lego League because I love Legos and love robots. So of course, why not? But as I kind of helped students work through some of these problems, it was really, really interesting to me to hear the conversations that they were having and some of the problems that they were trying to tackle through programming their robot, and just kind of how they went about that. And at the time, I was a younger teacher. I could tell it was just very, very different than the types of conversations that were kind of taking place in the regular classroom. So when I got to these computational thinking skills, when I first saw them for the first time, they really connected strong with me because it really kind of defines those types of thinking and problem solving that happen in computer science explicitly. And just like Andrea said earlier, even if students don't go on to major in computer science or go into the professional field of computer science, these skills can help no matter what they're doing, no matter what they're studying in school or what they choose to pursue in life. These types of thinking and problem solving skills really benefit all students. I think it was Steve Jobs has a pretty big quote that says, all students should learn how to program a computer because it really teaches them how to think. And so I love these computational thinking skills because it really defines kind of what those are and how they work. So on the left side in the yellow are different concepts or kind of skills that students use as they're programming. And on the right is more approaches or mindsets, kind of how they're approaching it. I'm not going to read each and every one out here, but I wanted to call out a couple ones that I connect with a lot. And I'm curious if anyone else has any connections that they see to these computational thinking skills or how they might connect to other content areas as well. These thinking skills can be a great way to connect computer science with other content areas because these skills can be really, really beneficial or already used in other areas as well. One area that I really, utilize a lot is the idea of decomposition. Decomposition is the idea that you take a big problem and break it down into smaller pieces. We did that a lot in math class where we had like a big problem, we broke it down into smaller steps and then kind of figured out how to solve those smaller steps. So kind of making that connection between, hey, in Scratch, you want to have your character move across the screen and grab a ball or something, I don't know. Like that could be your big problem and then you break it down to smaller steps. Okay, I got to get the sprite to move from here to here. Maybe I have to animate the hand to like reach down and grab the ball. I have to kind of connect those two sprites somehow. So taking like big things that kids want to do and breaking it down to smaller steps is a skill that I've kind of leaned on a lot and really also connected to other content areas. Even writing, for example, if students are writing an essay, that could be like their big project. Then you break it down to smaller parts of how you want to break up that essay and how you want to use supporting details. So that's one connection that I had with these computational thinking skills. There's many here, and I was just curious, as we're looking at this graphic here, if anyone else had any connections that they saw between these computational thinking skills and maybe other areas in other content.
Hi, I can share. I always found a really strong connection to debugging. So I actually have this poster in my second grade classroom. I'm actually leaving the classroom for next year. But so in my second grade classroom, I had this up, and we would always talk about debugging, especially with math problems, and just kind of using that word really connected to their computer science lessons. But it was also kind of an easier way for them to think of, okay, I made a mistake, but I can go back and try to find where that mistake was made. So I thought it really helped, especially in math. And then we also kind of talked about algorithms and how some of our math concepts we could internalize like a set of steps or rules to really help us solve math problems. So kind of using both of those two terms really helped in math, and it gave them like a little challenge, because debugging is just kind of a fun word, I think.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for sharing that. I found debugging to be really helpful too. I mean, how many times have students said something like, oh, the laptop's broken, or it's glitching, or they just kind of always blame the device. So it's really helpful to kind of work through that process of figuring out what's going on and why and how to work through it in really intentional ways. Thank you for sharing that. Does anyone else have any other connections that they saw that they really connect with or can see in other content areas as well? Yeah, that's okay. So we'll keep coming back to these computational thinking skills throughout our course this week. This graphic is from a group called Barefoot Computing out of the UK. I think there's a link to their website there. The website does now require a membership, but it's free. And it's something I would highly, highly recommend if you're interested in these computational thinking skills at all. They have tons of great resources, graphics like this poster, different ones. They have activities and lesson plans to kind of develop each one of these skills. So it's a great resource to check out. It's a free sign up, and then you have full access to all their stuff. So definitely recommend checking that out if you will. But we just wanted to call out and spend some time kind of exploring these things, both the computational thinking skills and the NC WIT engagement practices. We'll kind of revisit these each day, but we see these as two really big foundational pieces of kind of like the pedagogy of how you're implementing Scratch and why. It really kind of provides a lot more direction and clarity, and making sure we're doing it in ways that all students can kind of enter into it. So we really wanted to take some time to explore these, and we'll come back to these each day. But next we can kind of take a look at what we're going to do today and this afternoon as well. Andrew, do you want to share about that?
Yeah, sure. All right, so we are engaging now in our synchronous live session. We've got each of our live sessions divided into share, discuss, and collaborate. We engaged in our sharing already, where we shared a little bit about favorite projects or resources. Next up, we're going to be talking about, so we did a little bit about equitable teaching practices, and we're going to dive next into K-12 CS practices to talk about kind of the framework for how to approach computer science in different classroom settings. And then we'll have our collaborate task, where we'll do some pair programming online here. Again, we do have an optional office hours opportunity today from 2 to 3 p.m. Totally optional. Feel free to drop in if it works for you just for a couple minutes. No need to stay for the whole time. Really just to cater to your needs and any questions that you have. Our asynchronous time today has a variety of different topics to focus on. Really, we always center our asynchronous tasks around learn, engage, create, and reflect. So you know that those 4 things will be present around each of our days. So today is all about learning kind of some of those intermediate and advanced computer science and Scratch skills. We do have a little bit of a pretest. This is nothing that we're collecting data about you or anything. It's really just meant as a self-reflection, like where are you at with some of the different intermediate and advanced skills, and which ones would you like to focus on particularly for this camp. And then we have some resources so that you can choose, you can self-select which of those different concepts you really want to dig into. The engage task will be for where we'll have some sample projects and some tutorials so that you can, and even some unplugged activities so that you can dive into those specific concepts or skills that you identified. And then, as Tom mentioned earlier, we do have an opportunity today for you to create a Scratch project to help students kind of follow one computational thinking or computer science concept from beginner to intermediate to advanced level. Tom has an example project that he did looking at dialogue. So when you're first introducing dialogue to students, how might that look, or what sorts of kind of output would we expect on a project? What would an intermediate dialogue example look like, and what would an advanced dialogue example look like? This is every project that we kind of suggest is open to your adaptation and interpretation. Nothing is going to be sort of graded to the letter, not at all. In fact, there's no grading for this course. It's just sort of a, did you complete it or not? And so we invite you to kind of look at the framework that we've set out and then adapt it to the concept or the context that makes the most sense for you. And then we every day just encourage reflection, choosing a reflection question from your design journal. And then we do have a discussion prompt so that you can kind of reflect and share it with one another. I use the word day loosely. This is what we've set out for day one, knowing that you might complete day one tasks at different paces, and that's totally okay. All right, so we mentioned that we have kind of a discussion piece that we'd like to engage you in next. We wanted to point out, this is something from, again, that k12cs.org website. This is one of their main kind of features, is looking at different practices for incorporating computer science and computational thinking into the classroom. And what we wanted to invite you to do is to kind of reflect on how you see these already in your work with students, or where you see some entry points being in your work with students, and kind of reflecting back on these. And we have a Padlet that I'll show you on this next slide, and I'll read out these practices to you here as we go. Oops, I'm going to skip over that one for just a quick second. So as we look at these K-12 CS practices, really looking at kind of how do they match up with your philosophy for teaching computer science? Do you have some non-negotiables, and do they fit in with those non-negotiables? Like maybe you're thinking, I always want to have hands-on tasks. How do hands-on tasks fit with these K-12 CS framework practices? Maybe you just want to respond to what stands out to you when you look at these. Maybe you want to find a connection between these K-12 CS practices and the engagement practices that we looked at for equitable teaching. Maybe you think there's already something that jives really well with how you teach, or something that you could adjust slightly that you teach currently to really mesh well with one of these K-12 CS practices. Or maybe you'd like to just respond to how you could start incorporating one of these in the fall. So these are some prompts to look at as you're discussing together. And I believe we have this Padlet is going to be kind of your final product after your discussion. So what we're going to do is we're going to just take a quick moment to read over these practices, and then we're going to break into discussion groups to go over those discussion questions that I just read. Your discussion groups, I think we'll have about maybe 15, 20 minutes in our discussion groups to really just engage in those questions, dig in a little bit to these K-12 CS practices. And then what we'd ask is when you're finishing up in your discussion groups to just post an idea to share out on the Padlet. All right, so again, to look over these K-12 CS practices, here's what we've got. So we've got fostering an inclusive computing culture, collaborating around computing, recognizing and defining computational problems, developing and using abstractions, creating computational artifacts, testing and refining computational artifacts, and then communicating about computing. So these are the different practices that K12cs.org, which is kind of a conglomeration of a variety of large computer science education organizations from across the United States and the world, have come together to identify as these are really the core practices for approaching computer science. So with that, I'm going to make sure that you have the link to this presentation one more time so that you can access these questions. These are starting points. Feel free to jump off of any of these questions in your discussions, and we'll pull you back in about 15 or 20 minutes or so. Anything else to add, Tom, before we divide up here?
Yeah, could you go back to that previous slide just real quick? So we know we've kind of been throwing a lot at you with these the frameworks and the equitable teaching practices and the computational thinking skills. So it may feel overwhelming, but we just kind of want to encourage you a little bit to think about it in a little bit different way, that they're all really connected. The framework from K-12 CS that we just looked over could kind of be thought about best practices for computer science education, right? Like in math or reading, lots of different areas kind of have best practices, best ways to really help students engage with that content area. So we look at the K-12 CS framework as the best practices for computer science education. The NC-WIT engagement practices are really calling to the forefront equitable practices and making sure that all students feel comfortable and safe entering into computer scientists and kind of identify with and see themselves as computer science. We know how big of an issue equity is, so we really wanted to have just some specific intentional ways to call that out, and we felt that the NC-WIT framework did a really nice job with those. And then the computational thinking skills are kind of the skills and mindsets that students use as they're doing computer science. So this might feel like kind of a lot at first, but they're all really connected and build off one another really well. So I'd encourage you to also call back to the NC-WIT practices or the computational thinking skills as you're doing those discussion questions as well.
Absolutely. Yep. Thanks for mentioning that. Great point. All right. So I'm going to copy the link specifically to this slide here, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen, paste that in the chat here, and then I will break us up into breakout groups. All right, we're going to do 3 breakout groups, so there will be 2 or 3 of you per room. This will help just make sure that we have plenty of chance for you to have your opinions and your perspectives heard. Tom and I will also be a part of the room, so we'll be participating in the discussion as well. And feel free, oops, let me make sure I pasted that in the right spot. There we go. Feel free to reach out to us. I think there's, at the top of the screen, there will be kind of a click here if you need help or if you have a question. Feel free to reach out to us if you do need anything. All right, we'll see you in about 15 to 20 minutes. All right, welcome back. people just another couple seconds to migrate back here. Here we go. All right, I saw some people populating our Padlet here. I'll take a moment to share my screen on the Padlet and then would love to hear from any groups that want to share. Tell us a little bit about what you're thinking. I know there's a lot to think about and definitely okay if your conversations went off in another direction, but just curious to hear from different groups. Anybody want to start us off?
Sure, I will.
Great.
Our group, we got down to the, the end of the list there, and it was like, where are you going to start in the fall? And we had a really hard time answering that question and thinking about how the practices would fit in with whatever fall looks like, just because of that. And we brought this up other times throughout our discussion, that collaboration piece is so important. And how are we going to make that work if kids can't touch the same device or be right next to each other? So that was kind of just a struggle for us when we were discussing.
Absolutely. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That's very real. Anybody else want to share?
I can share. I'm not exactly sure which question this answers, but something that really sticks out to me when looking at the K-12 CS framework is the words like collaborate, develop, create, communicate. And just those words, I feel like outside of computer science, like those are the skills that that I personally want to develop in my students, just to be better humans and better at life. And so those, just how can we teach them those important skills in, not that, like Tom said, we're not developing, or maybe it was Andrea, like little computer scientists, but if we can teach them those social skills, that they can be better at everything they do.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Appreciate you saying that.
I could share. Lee and I were talking about just using Scratch for a wide variety of purposes, and we both kind of noticed that students kind of enter into Scratch in a lot of different ways, kind of on their own interests. Since Scratch is so open-ended, you can use it for telling stories or making a little game or animation or to model something. And when you're kind of using Scratch in lots of different ways, it seems like there's certain students that really connect with it and just run with it certain ways, whether it's making a game or things like that. So it's just cool to see where students enter into Scratch, and just as educators, trying to intentionally provide lots of different opportunities to utilize Scratch in lots of different ways to kind of help students make those connections.
Yeah, absolutely. Great point. Good deal. Well, appreciate you engaging in some conversation around those K-12 CS practices and beyond, and just kind of keeping those in mind as we're thinking about ways to approach computer science and ways that Scratch will find its way into a variety of different curricular areas and concepts as we continue through our time together this week and beyond. So appreciate you talking about those. I'm going to guide us over to our kind of our final activity for our live call here, and that is our pair programming example. So again, keeping in mind, just as Ashley was saying, who knows what things will look like in the fall, but if there's any sort of virtual aspect to what we'll be doing, we want to find a way to be able to preserve the pair programming collaborative structure. And so here's kind of the basics of pair programming, and then I'll let you know what model we're proposing and what we're going to try out today. So pair programming, if you haven't engaged in it before, is the practice of having two students use the same device to program together and accomplish a common task. So they're working on the same project. One student acts as the driver. That's the student who has their hands on the computer. That's the one who's kind of doing the driving, I guess, on the device. And the other one acts as the navigator, and they're sort of helping with more of the big picture things. Maybe there's some debugging that they're helping with. They might be pointing on the screen, but they're not touching the device. They might kind of be brainstorming next steps or helping to think through like, oh, what if we tried this? And really we emphasize with students that that happens through talking and through pointing without touching the computer. A few benefits of pair programming is really it has that structured collaboration through defined roles. Really, two heads are better than one sort of a thing where kids are working together to solve problems and navigate new concepts. And then because of that, they're building confidence in each other. There are some really great resources for pair programming that we wanted to point out. One of them is from CS Teaching Tips, which is a great resource to explore for a variety of things, but they have a pair programming tip sheet. And then CS and SF out of San Francisco, their 6th grade Intro to Pair Programming unit has some really great kind of structures and practice projects and things like that that you can try out. So I wanted to let you know about those. Again, we've got a driver and a navigator, and we're going to try to preserve those roles here in a virtual space. What sometimes we do is we have like a timer going, and maybe every 3 or 4 minutes you switch roles. We're going to try to do a similar thing, and here's what I'm proposing. So the consideration is that Scratch does not allow 2 people to be simultaneously working on the same project on different computers, unfortunately. Maybe in the future, who knows? But here's what we're going to try. We're going to break out into pairs in Zoom through breakout rooms. And we're going to work on the same Scratch project by opening it up and working on it at the same time on different devices. Each partner will have that same Scratch project open, but in their own version of that project, and they'll discuss next steps. Each partner will have a chance to share their screen, and we'll practice switching who's sharing maybe every 4 minutes, keeping in mind that communication is key. So which project are we going to engage in, or how's this going to work? Well, we're proposing that we do an all about me project for both of you, so that on both of your screens, you'll have a version of an about me project that includes both of you. And this can be an opportunity to get to know one another, highlight similarities and differences about you, and also practice some of your basic Scratch skills. So again, if Tom and I are partners, we will both have an About Me project up on our screens. We will both have kind of sprites that represent each of us on our screens. And then through question and answering, we can fill in what each sprite should say or do based on like our favorite things or how we want others to know us, those kinds of things. We have a few prompts there that could be helpful for students, or helpful for us as we're engaging this project. And Tom and I can partner up as well if we have an odd number. We have about, let me look at my clock. We have about 20 solid minutes to engage in this. And we know that's not enough, but we want to just give it a try to see how this model might work, and we can always revisit again. Any questions about it before we break up into pair programming partners? So on Scratch, I'm just thinking out loud about this here. There is an About Me starter project. Let's see. But I'm trying to remember if it's here in their ideas or if it's one that we have to link to. You can, without having to use a tutorial, you can feel free to just start from a basic project. Yep, sorry that you're watching this with me. So I'd say start from a basic project, and then through question and answering, you can add sprites and add actions and things like that. The sharing the screen every 4 minutes, we'll kind of leave that up to you to determine, is that the right number of minutes? Do you need to go fewer or more? And then really that's just to kind of keep accountability going and make sure that both partners are engaged and can get the help that they need if you're getting stuck anywhere. Sound okay? Should we give it a try?
Wait, I have a question.
Go for it.
So each person is going to essentially have the exact same thing happening on their screen. Is that right?
Yeah, right.
Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, the goal here is 100% accuracy between both partners, kind of step for step. Any creative idea that you have that you want to incorporate, communicate that to your partner so that they can incorporate that as well. This sort of reminds me of like unplugged activities where you create something and then you have to like explain to your partner who can't see exactly what you're doing how to create it. So that communication piece could be a little challenging. But again, this is just a model we're trying out and we'll refine as we go maybe. We'll pull back together for one final minute at the very end, but I want to be sure to give you as much time as possible. I'm just going to do random breakout rooms here, so you may not have the same partner. And I think maybe I want to add one more room, and I'm going to, okay. All right, I'm going to send you to your rooms now, and we'll see you in about 20 minutes. Good luck. So fun. So fun. Nobody's going to be ready to come back, I'm predicting. And who can blame?
That's a good sign, though. That's a good thing.
Yeah, that is good. Here they come. It's so hard to come back from that. Oops. There we go. All right. We are coming back slowly but surely from a rousing, exciting, so fun pair programming experience. Here we come. Last couple of people joining back. All right. Well, I know we're at 10:30. I would invite a one-word response from people here. How did that go? Unmute your mic and just tell us really quick in one word. How did it go?
It was funny.
Exciting.
Fun.
Yeah, fun.
Good deal. Well, if it's okay with you, we'll try out some pair programming again tomorrow with a little different focus. We know you didn't get a chance to finish your About Me projects. That's okay. We hope that you connected a little bit with a partner and that you got to collaborate a little bit and that maybe you have some thoughts that we can revisit again, either tomorrow during office hours or asynchronously via our discussions about how to refine that virtual pair programming experience. Just as we sign off here, wanted to remind you, you have the option of optional office hours today from 2 to 3 p.m. We'll be live again tomorrow morning with a little different focus, but same structure where we'll have sharing, we'll have discussion, and we'll have collaboration time again. If you haven't had a chance to log on to Canvas, we encourage you to do that. All of our day one and welcome tasks are live now. And again, work at your own pace. No pressure to get it all done today, but feel free to reach out if you have any questions. And with that, we'll see you either online later today or we'll see you tomorrow.
Perfect.
Thanks so much, everybody. Great to meet you. Great to work with you.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.
Bye. Thank you.
We'll stay on if you have any questions here too for a couple minutes. Feel free to let us know.
Hey, I don't have a question. I know you said we didn't have to come to everything. That's okay. But does Gretchen and I have a CS or a Bloomington meeting tomorrow during this time? So we're going to.
Okay. No worries. No worries. Appreciate it. Yeah. Well, we'll see you another time.
Yeah, the next day. All right.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks.
Bye, guys.